have an hour to cover a lot, so I'm going to dive right in. So thank you all for joining us today on the first of a series of webinars. We'll probably have 5 or 6 webinars for the Tribal Pollution Prevention Action Project. So this webinar focuses on how to reduce pollution, save money, and increase resilience with clean energy microgrids at tribal businesses and government facilities. So I'm not sure if Ray is on here today, but so the Tribal Pollution Prevention Action Project is being funded by an EPA pollution prevention grant that has been received by the Viejas band of Kumeyaay Indians. And Ray Turan, resources manager, has been overseeing this project. I don't see Ray on right now. Otherwise, I'd have him introduce himself. So my name is Josh Simmons, president with Prosper Sustainably, leading the consulting team, performing the work on behalf of Viejas for this project. We have Cher, who I think is hopped off and trying to wrangle some of the other presenters right now. And she's been the lead project manager. Hopefully we'll have Alan, Craig, and others from Indian Energy for their portion of the upcoming presentation. And we have John Clancy here from Godfrey and Kahn, who supports a lot of tribal microgrid projects, and I'll actually share more about him in a moment. So the Tribal Pollution Prevention Action Project is focused on helping tribes reduce pollution, prevent pollution in the areas of energy, water, and hazardous substances. So the webinar series we're going to host is to cover a wide range of topics. This one's focused on microgrids. We're going to have one focused on vehicle electrification. There'll be one focused on waste reduction and another also focused on water reduction. So future webinars will be announced coming up. I encourage you all to go to tribalp2action.org. So Viejas right now is the awardee. We previously initiated this project with Paul Band of Mission Indians, and also in partnership with the San Pasqual Band. So all the resources for the Tribal P2 Action Project have been shared and are available. And so I encourage you to go to the website for regular updates. And if you're not on the email list, you'll be added as a result of registering for this webinar. And also please save the date. So we're actually going to have an in-person summit at Viejas. Actually, Cher, you pointed out that I had the wrong dates. So that's actually on September 10th and 11th at Viejas in Alpine, California. And Cher, you want to just quickly run through the kind of speakers that we have coming, some of the agenda items? Are you prepared to? It's going to cover a lot of the same topics that I was mentioning. We're going to actually focus on kind of clean energy, microgrids, vehicle electrification, and installing EV charging infrastructure, waste management, source reduction, some hazardous substances management, water efficiency and conservation and reduction, all focused on tribal businesses and government facilities. Cher, did I miss anything?
You did pretty well. Also sustainable purchasing alternatives. But yeah, thank you. I was having issues getting off mute.
Awesome. And then that will also include a tour on the second day. So it's going to be a full day on September 10th. The second day, September 11th, will include a tour in the morning. It's going to include a tour of Viejas' microgrid that's set to achieve permission to operate soon. And the Indian Energy team will share more about that. And then possibly also a tour of some of the waste management activities going on there. Okay, so I've kind of done introductions for everybody already, ran through those as we sought to catch you up, provide an overview of the Pollution Prevention Action Project. I'm going to kick off the presentations today focused on planning a tribal microgrid project, pointing to a number of examples that Prosper has been involved in supporting. I'll then turn it over to the Indian Energy team to talk about the Viejas microgrid project, and then I'm going to turn it over to John Clancy to provide some updates on the federal investment tax credits, which are still a bit of a moving target right now. So I'll be interested to hear the latest on that. So I'm going to dive in. I have quite a number of slides here, but I'm going to breeze through them pretty quickly. And before that, I'm not going to read all these out. There's a number of acronyms on these slides. I'll seek to state the full name of the acronyms themselves, but you can come back. We'll share these slides afterwards, and also a copy of the recording. Okay, so I want to really just kind of help you all by walking through the process, or at least the process that I go through time and time again for kind of planning and proceeding with a tribal microgrid project, pointing to examples of microgrids that we're working on that have either been constructed or are at various stages of development. So the very first thing you want to start with is, why do you want a microgrid? Like, what are the needs you're looking to solve? What are your goals? What are your objectives for this facility? Because they're complex, and they're not simple undertakings. Some of them are simpler than others. Also understanding your circumstances. Are you grid connected? Do you have facilities that aren't grid connected you need power for? So what are your power supply threats, or do you not have power? How long, if you are grid connected, how long and frequent are your outages? What essential community facilities need power? Do these facilities have backup power? What is the capacity of that power? And so the kind of first few high-level questions are more focused on resilience, but some people consider microgrids also as a resource to reduce their energy costs, increase their energy independence. So how much energy do you use, electricity in particular, and how much are you paying? Are some good initial questions to understand what you need, why you may want a microgrid, what you need it for. So wildfire threat is in California in particular, and other places, a significant driver behind microgrid facilities, because in California they're leading to public safety power shutoff events that are de-energizing critical facilities and pretty much whole communities. So, working with the San Pasqual band on their microgrid project, one of the driving forces behind the one that they install, which is behind me right here, was wildfires. So they've had a series of wildfires early in the 2000s, and being in northeastern San Diego County, the wildfire threat is continuously a threat. Public safety power shutoffs are continuously happening, and therefore, their critical facilities are being de-energized. So the San Pasqual's microgrid project goals included, first and foremost, resilience. They were experiencing outages at their government complex, really the hub of their community, which included a variety of facilities providing essential community services, and they needed to maintain electrical power at those facilities during outages. They also, looking at their energy bills, not liking how much the SDG&E bills were going up year after year, which are among the highest in the country, probably behind Alaska and Hawaii, and wanted to reduce those electricity costs. And they were also motivated to achieve 100% renewable energy, reducing greenhouse gas emissions and other air pollutant emissions. Working with Rincon on their series of microgrids, very similar goals of increasing resilience. They were experiencing facilities getting de-energized, lowering their energy costs, increasing their independence, having clean energy, reducing air pollution emissions, and then also seeking to have facilities that are scalable. So, once you've kind of oriented and determined why you want a microgrid, then you need to consider, what are your options? Does a microgrid actually make sense? And then if it does, how do you analyze and determine what your options are, so you can start to take your next step? So you want to start off by gathering and analyzing site information and data. So what are those facilities? Answering some of those questions about, like, what do they have generators already? What are they paying for energy? How long are the outages? Getting utility data, usage data, getting utility cost data. And you can use this, you can run it through a number of tools. I like to use things like, Energy Toolbase and Helioscope are kind of standard tools. There's SAM, there are free tools as well that you can use to kind of analyze system sizing. Like, if you want to offset 100% of your load with solar, you can use some of these, like Helioscope, to determine that. If you want to appropriately size the battery and see what it's going to do to reduce your energy bill, you can use Energy Toolbase. There's there are, like I said, a number. There's Homer Grid, Homer Pro, a number of good tools out there. Zendi's another one we've been using more frequently that will help you kind of shortcut this process to understand what your options are and quickly iterate. And I usually start by getting the interval data, seeing, starting with, okay, what would it take to size a PV system to offset 100% of the usage? And then, depending on the outages, I've sized a lot of batteries to a minimum of 4 hours for an outage. That's actually, kind of been what's been funded by a rebate here in California. But I think, how big you want to size the battery depends upon how long your outages are. But usually you start with what is your peak demand. So what's the maximum amount of energy you use in a given year, or what's the peak demand of the essential loads that you can isolate? And then how many hours do you need to be able to support those essential loads during an outage? And that's, so if you have a peak demand of 100 kilowatts, then you have outages that are range from 2 to 4 hours, that you want to be able to not run the generators during. Maybe you have longer, but you at least want that minimum capacity. Then your kind of minimum starting point might be 100 kilowatt, 400 kilowatt, or 4 hour battery. So it'd be a 400 kilowatt hour battery. So at San Pasqual, these were kind of at their government campus. These were the essential facilities: their admin building, housing and security, their fire department, education building, preschool, and wastewater treatment plant, are all kind of co-located on the campus, providing a number of services, essential community services, particularly during an emergency. So with the information we gathered on these facilities, we initially sized the solar at 160 kilowatts of new, because there was 24 kilowatts of existing solar on the education building. There were existing propane generators. I think maybe we were replacing them or supplementing them. So we sized the battery actually at a 2-hour battery, at about the peak load. And including microgrid control schemes and energy management controls to be able to manage the in particular the HVAC, the heating and air conditioning in particular during an outage. Because if you have an outage and the power comes back on, your HVAC ramps up, that can really strain these resources and can lead the system to shut down. So you often want to have energy management controls to control impacts like that. Okay, so you run the initial analyses, and this is an iterative process. So as you go and progress, you may find that you kind of reevaluate the design. You look at the economics, and you make changes as you gather more information. So hopefully you've come to the point where you've defined like what your initial scope and your sizing is. You may have evaluated different sizing options and kind of settled in, like we did on the San Pasqual project, and then you very likely may need some additional project funding or financing beyond just the tribe's funding itself. So you may be pursuing grants, you may be pursuing tax credits. So here's a list of some that have been, some of which are and have been available for microgrid projects. The DOE Office of Indian Energy, so that's OIE, has recurring tribal energy infrastructure grants. Hopefully those continue to be made available. Many tribes secured the 401(d) grid resilience grants. They're not a substantial amount, but some have been able to stack them to get to $500,000 or more. The loan guarantee, the DOE loan program, loan guarantee program seems to have been going away. The Indian Energy team can share a bit more about that and their experience in utilizing that program. DOE does still offer technical assistance. BIA doesn't offer any funding for microgrids. The resilience program grants, which may have gone away, could potentially fund microgrids, but they have right now there's an open solicitation for the BIA Energy Minerals Development Program grants. You can use those to plan microgrid systems. So doing a lot of those resource analyses, like I was talking about, the options, the feasibility studies, and planning. And BIA also offers technical assistance. I haven't taken advantage of theirs. I have utilized DOE's. I don't have much experience with USDA, but I do know, and I've seen some tribes secure some REAP, Rural Energy for America program grants, and I think there may be other grants and loan programs from USDA that may be able to fund microgrids. Here in California, the California Energy Commission has various grants that can fund microgrid project. We've secured in the past. EPIC is Energy Policy Investment Charge or something, or energy. Anyways, they have funding for kind of demonstration projects. LDES is long duration energy storage. They've had funding for that. The CPUC has offered self-generation incentive program energy storage rebates. Energy Commission offers some low interest loans. And then John Clancy will get into some of the details of the federal investment tax credit options, including the direct pay, elective pay option. And you can also partner with a third party on tax equity financing and do it creatively too, as we've done with the Rincon tribe. Another option too is to pursue traditional loans and financing. But I find with these projects, it typically microgrids themselves, the infrastructure requirements, unless they're very simple systems, they often require additional funding in order to be cost effective. Same time, if you have critical facilities being shut down, there's a value to that. So I guess when you're running your cash flow analysis, you may want to factor in what is the cost of those outages. Okay, so hopefully you've secured some funding and now you're in the process of conducting your microgrid project procurement. We've ran some detailed RFPs. We're actually running a detailed request for proposals right now for Verona for a series of microgrids serving their community. And so it's really, in order to get to this stage, you have to have done a certain level of kind of preliminary design on this and analysis to ensure you know what you want. If you don't, then you're kind of putting yourself more at the whim of the developer that's kind of coming in. So it's if you can, it's best to have an owner's representative on your behalf running these analyses so that you can get competitive procurement and get hopefully apples to apples bids. From my perspective, it's always advisable to seek to contract a single developer for the full microgrid. So you have, as they say in the industry, one throat to choke. One developer that has a full wrap workmanship warranty and is responsible for the full project. So that's not always something you can do. So at Rincon, we ended up having to do a separate procurement. It ended up being from the same developer on the project of solar panels. We had to do an expedited procurement to get solar panels delivered relatively quickly to the site to safe harbor a certain aspect of the tax code, so the tribe wouldn't be locked in to prevailing wages, which weren't budgeted for when they got the initial funding for the project. So you may find yourself doing separate procurements as needed or creative ones. In this environment right now, you may need to get creative to ensure you lock in the tax credit before some more significant requirements occur. So hopefully you've completed the procurement, you've got competitive bids, you've selected your developer, and then you'll progress in the design and engineering to the final design and engineering, and they'll likely go to 30%, 60%, 90% to full construction documents. And during that process, they'll be submitting the interconnection application. That's something you want to get started as early as possible, initiating permitting. You may find that you need BIA rights of way or easement approvals, which can slow down your project and be complicated. So, getting these things defined in the scope of work is important to do as well. So for San Pasqual, this was kind of a preliminary design we prepared that was included in the RFP that was submitted. The full, this isn't like certainly the final drawings or plan sets and all that. As we were going through the process, I don't remember at what point this project occurred a number of years ago. We determined to remove the wastewater treatment plant as being an unnecessary load to include in the project. So you'll find different things happen along the way. Sometimes more significant things happen. So in the case of San Pasqual too, we ended up kind of adjusting some of the sizing. So actually we did end up with a 4-hour battery there, and we adjusted the size of the PV as we progressed with the design engineering. And also they had added in some EV charging stations along the way too, which affected the load. So sometimes the changes are more complex. So this is the Rincon Harris microgrid project. that initially was a massive project supporting the casino, the full casino campus that was experiencing day-plus long outages that they didn't have resources to keep the facility online. So we had secured a number of grants and funding for this project, and it had multiple forms of energy storage. And then as we were progressing through the project, well, we actually learned that SDG&E was nearing completion of undergrounding of a utility line coming up to the facility, now making the full campus project not necessary. So we pivoted to a more economic project serving just the chiller plant and removing the flywheel system just for the flow battery system. And this again was, kind of the V2 design, and then ultimately this is more reflective of the final design. Again, this is the conceptual one, not the final drawings of this. Where things shifted around. There was consideration of a parking structure potentially in the future going in this space, so moving it over here. So things change. Sometimes there's significant things along the way. So I think it's another kind of a word piece of advice would be to always attempt to conservatively budget on these projects, because costs can and will increase, particularly as things change. And it's hard to know what the true costs are going to be in the early phases. So I can run some estimates on costing for these projects initially, and then until you progress with the engineering, till the developer gets in there and really starts to open things up, you start to kind of find that, oh well, what we assumed was the case isn't necessarily, and often it ends up being more complex and more expensive. Not always, but you want to consider that. Same thing, Rincon Government Center also changed. Initially, we had it on the roof. There was some issues with the roof, so we had to move it to the parking lot. This was the conceptual design. I think this is closer to the final design right now. So again, things change along the way. Fire station as well. It was on the roof. It moved here. It shifted around, and then this ended up being more the final design. I think it shrunk down a little bit. At Paula, we had a series of microgrids, kind of single solar plus storage microgrids serving a number of facilities. And due to cost increases and other factors that occurred along the way, we ended up eliminating some of the smaller facilities and sites. So you've gone through this process. It's been an iterative process. It's the development process. I mean, it says design and engineering. It's really the development process. Pre-construction development takes a long time. It can take a year. It can take 2 years. It can take a few years. You get through that. Changes occur along the way, and then you reach the construction phase of the project. So the San Pasqual project has been completed with their solar and their storage. This is the recently completed solar arrays at the Paula admin building. And this is the Tesla battery installed there. This is at Rincon now, the construction that's in process right now. The pads have recently been laid for the flow batteries, the carports have been fully constructed. And then you want to be accounting for your ongoing operations and maintenance. So kind of one real critical thing to consider is make sure you're factoring in the operations and maintenance costs in the beginning and replacement costs. There's a lot of costs to operate complex microgrids that if you don't properly factor them in, the return you may be expecting to get really may not be what it is. So again, you want to be kind of conservative, try to include all the possible costs you can, try to get actual bids, try to get contracts in place for O&M, at least as early as you can, so you get locked in pricing and you know what it is for operations and maintenance. But it's not just maybe solar panel maintenance and potentially cleanings. There usually are battery O&M, the microgrid controls themselves need to be managed, and there may be other aspects of the system that need ongoing O&M. I have a number of challenges and lessons learned. I'm going to save these to the end if we have time. I covered, I think, a number of them throughout, but I want to make sure we have enough time for both the Indian Energy team and John Clancy. So I'm going to pass it over to Alan, and then Alan or Craig.
Yeah. Can you pass it to me?
Sure.
Yeah, pass it to me. Thanks, Josh.
Okay, so you're a co-host, Craig. You should be able to share your screen now. Oh, sorry. There you go.
Thanks. Oh, all right. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Josh and Prosper Sustainably for putting on this event, this webinar, and also inviting us to be here. We're honored to be here, so thank you. We are Indian Energy, and we're an energy developer among many other things that we'll talk about briefly today. My name is Craig Ryder. I am Chief Sustainability Officer of the Indian Energy Group and General Manager of Mataush, which is a sister company to Indian Energy. We do distribution and logistics and maintenance for microgrids. So I'm going to just briefly tell you about Indian Energy, and so we can get into the meat of the project, and so we can all, we want to talk about the Viejas Enterprise Microgrid and challenges and lessons learned and just all the fun stuff that has happened on that project. But before we do that, we're Indian Energy, 100% Native American owned company. The owners of Indian Energy are members of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians out of northern Michigan. And the tribe is also 50% owner in Indian Energy. We develop microgrids, we're system integrators. We're technology agnostic. So really we go in and we design a system that is going to meet the customer's needs. You know, we're not there to sell any particular product, although we have spent a lot of time testing and validating products. So we have, you know, recommendations, but we're not tied to any specific technology, which is certainly important in the space that we're in, to make sure that the solution is something that is going to benefit the tribe and not be locked into some technology, you know, that hasn't been tried and tested. We're primarily focused on Indian country and the Department of Defense, two entities that are, you know, very focused on energy sovereignty. And obviously this is, you know, this is our focus as well. When we design and engineer and construct microgrids, we do it from the perspective of long-term tribal ownership, which is a different perspective than somebody that might be coming in to just try and flip a project, right? So we want to build projects that the tribe has the ability to own and operate if they choose so, but certainly is going to be a solution for 25 plus years on the reservation. We're made up of, we have several different companies as part of the Indian Energy Group. Mataush, which I had spoke to, Chippewa Sustainable Solutions, which is our Tribal 8A, Indian Power, which is our development arm in Mexico, and then Jinktamok. This is our special purpose entity that we create when developing a project so that the tribes have ownership in the microgrid or in the power plant, and the special purpose entity allows for that ownership structure to happen. Our vision, you know, this is Indian Energy's vision for Indian country. Obviously, there's a lot out there, and with owners being Native American, it's, you know, this really comes straight from the heart. We want to build microgrids with tribes and for tribes. You know, as I mentioned, solutions that are going to benefit the tribes, create long-term revenue streams. We want to continue to develop Native American workforces, and that includes the education side, the training side, and building out those workforces so that there's long-term career paths there. Developing a Indigenous Institute for Technology to really hone in the STEM focus of you know, technology and science and engineering and math in the Native American community, and then developing and building out a energy sovereignty fund that allows tribes to help tribes to invest in energy sovereignty throughout Indian country in North America. So we focus on building military hardened microgrids. And what does that mean? That means cybersecurity is of the utmost importance, right? And that is having a strong control system built in that allows for the flexibility and an autonomous system, while also being able to prevent bad actors from being able to penetrate the system. So cybersecurity and controls are at the forefront of how we design a system. We want to make sure the system is cost effective, and then, as I mentioned before, we want to make sure we're designing a system that benefits the tribe. And as you can see on the left, and I think everyone is familiar, there are lots of different options out there for making a microgrid work for the customer. And a lot of it depends on the locale that you're in and what available resources are out there to make it the best solution for the tribe. This is what we've done for the Viejas Bana Kumeyaay Indians in Alpine, California. The Viejas Enterprise Microgrid includes 15 megawatts of carport solar, 70 megawatt hours of long duration energy storage, backed up by 700 megawatts of diesel generation. And you probably have read the rest of it on there, and Al is going to talk about that in more detail right now. This is Alan J. Cadrew, Vice President of Engineering for Indian Energy.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Craig. Appreciate the run through there. So the Viejas Enterprise Microgrid, Craig talked a little bit about the high level inclusions there, but I wanted to zoom in on kind of the plan view of the system. And so you can see the various colors there. Starting kind of at the bottom, you can see the carport layout, 15 megawatts of carport solar. Inside the blue line is the microgrid yard, where we have 70 megawatt hours of long duration energy storage, 7 megawatts of diesel generation, as well as all of the paralleling switchgear, which brings in, you can see on the green and the green, red, and yellow loops, 12 kV loops there that are shown across the property. Some of it new, the green and yellow are newly installed. The red was procured from SDG&E to complete our 12 kV circuitry. And it's really designed to bring all of the solar generation into a centralized location, bring in the battery energy storage as it's charged by the solar during the day, and then deliver the power during the excess solar power to the loads at the I don't think my cursor will hover, but the hotels, casino, parking garage, water treatment facilities, as well as the chiller plant are the critical infrastructure that the power source feeds. And what what has been a key to our success here has been the partnerships that we've created along the way with the tribe, as well as our financing structure, which we'll talk a little bit about. Josh mentioned the various complexities of financing these types of projects, and really, how creative can you get is how kind of detailed and robust your project can become, just based on the various funding sources that are out there and all of their nuances. So this project is chock full of a ton of lessons learned. We have a few slides that we can probably jump back to. We'll probably touch on a couple of the main ones in the Q&A if there's specifics, but I know we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So this is a rough timeline. I won't go through every single one of these, but I think the biggest takeaway from this slide is the concept for this project started back in 2020, and with a grant for a technology test bed in partnership with the Viejas, and really demonstrating our capability to deploy these types of projects in March, and our rapid integration commercialization unit at Miramar has kind of snowballed into various other opportunities. So the key is to get started, do something, get a shovel in the ground, show people that you are committed to it, as a tribal partner and as your development partners and your owners reps, that everybody's in this for the good of the tribe and the benefit of the tribe. And, so starting in 2020, and we're here now in July of 2025, 95% complete on construction and looking to have the system, placed in service before the end of the year. And it's been a long road in between multiple closings of different stages of bridge loans and mezzanine financing, ultimately leading. I mean, if you look at the executing the power purchase agreement with the tribe in April of 2022, and then closing permanent financing in August of 2024. It's almost 2.5 year process of closing permanent financing. Now that was a long road. A lot of those hurdles have been crossed, and a lot of groundbreaking in Indian country, a lot of firsts. Um, and so hopefully the next ones should be, easier. Um, a couple project benefits, and I know we're short here, so I think we'll stop after this slide, but wanted to highlight some of the project benefits in Indian country. So we can come back to this as needed, but largest California Energy Commission grant for a tribal project. It's the largest single carport location in the US, 15 megawatts DC. Largest EV charging super hub in North America, 417 chargers. Largest non-lithium storage project on tribal land. This was the first and so far the only tribal loan guarantee closed with the Department of Energy. This project is 51% owned by tribes, tribe in Michigan, a tribe in North Dakota, and in partnership on this project. We were able to qualify for the domestic content, which is a complex process, but doable now in Indian country and proven. Largest behind the meter renewable microgrid on tribal lands. We're going to be generating 26 million kilowatt hours of solar PV, and we have 7 megawatts of excess capacity that that is available to support the CAISO grid. I think that's probably good. Unless Craig, is there another slide we wanted to hit before jumping? Yeah. Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, well, Josh, are we out of time?
I think maybe we can pass it to John and hopefully we'll have a good, healthy cushion at the end. John, if you could maybe stop it with 10 minutes to go.
Okay, so we're gonna pass to John.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, and we'll be here and we can answer any questions at the end.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Alan and Craig. So I think you need to stop sharing, Craig, and then
Okay.
John can pull up his slides.
I'm trying.
Okay.
Wow, look at what's happening.
Going into Affinity.
Did that work?
Yep.
Okay.
Great. I think this should work then. Is it sharing mine?
You're good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Great. So just again, I'm John Clancy. I'm an attorney actually from Madison, Wisconsin, that works with tribes kind of throughout the country on clean energy projects. I've been fortunate to work with Josh on a number of projects in the Southern California area and worked with other tribes, kind of throughout the country, a lot of them in the Midwest because I'm from the Midwest, but a lot on kind of all directions of the United States. So I want to go through this kind of quickly, but the key thing here is, what happened under that big, beautiful bill to tax credits available for solar, wind, and microgrids. There's really solar and microgrids, but wind kind of goes together with solar. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page, though, first, in terms of what was allowed under the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which passed a couple of years ago under President Biden. What it did basically was kind of rejuvenate tax credits and expand them for clean energy projects. What it allowed for was a basic 30% tax credit if your project was not too big, below a megawatt AC or alternating current, or you met prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. So if you're a bigger project like the project is described, to get the tax credits, you have to meet prevailing wages and apprenticeships. If you're a smaller project, you can get the tax credits at 30% without having to meet those requirements. There's also under the IRA bonus credits. There's a 10% bonus credit for domestic content, which they mentioned just was applied to the VAO project, which is great, VA project. And then there's also an energy community bonus credit. So if your project's in the right location, a lot of Southern California meets the energy community requirement. And there's maps from DOE to show which areas qualify. And then secondly, if your project's not in one of those areas, but it's a brownfield site or meets certain brownfield criteria, it can also qualify for energy community credit, bonus credit of 10%. And then it was mentioned before also, there's these EJ bonus credits or bonus credits based on a low income or tribal status. Tribal projects can get up to a 10% bonus credit, and then projects that deal with low income housing, which oftentimes tribal housing might qualify for, could get a 20% bonus credit. But those potential credits are competitive. You have to apply for them and meet the requirements. But the good news there, and it still remains, is that tribal projects, which would be owned by a tribe or a tribal entity, get preferential treatment for that too, as a nonprofit entity. The IRA also provided for direct pay of tax credits, which allows non-taxable entities like tribes and tribal entities to directly receive the tax credit, or they can file for basically a refund on taxes they never paid, which is great. Obviously, it makes it more like a grant. However, you have to finish your project before you can apply for the tax credit, so that can sometimes be an issue to think about. And there are also transferable tax credits under the IRA. So that kind of sets the background of where things were going into this big, beautiful bill. And unfortunately, the areas that the big, beautiful bill went after mostly are solar and wind. They basically terminate what's called the PTC, or the production tax credit, which is one way you get the tax credit, which is based on the production of the facility, or the ITC, and the ITC, which is the investment tax credit, which is where you get paid essentially back, and if you're direct pay, especially paid back a certain portion of the project costs, whether it's 30%, or if you have bonus credits, maybe 40, 50 or more percent of the project. But for solar and wind, which they kind of went after in this big, beautiful bill, it changed the rules so that typically for most projects, unless you meet begin construction requirements, they have to be placed in service by the end of 2027, December 31, 2027. But there's an important exception to that, which, kind of eats up the rule a little bit, fortunately, which is that if you begin construction on or before July 4th of 2026, and July 4th, 2026 is 1 year after the big, beautiful bill passed. So it's within 1 year of the passage of the bill as a law, then you can avoid that, just end of December 2027 deadline for placing in service. And then what that means is that, at least under the current guidance, which I'll talk about a little bit later, is being modified under a Trump executive order, which you have to kind of track, solar and wind projects that begin by the end of this year would have 4 years basically to be placed in service. So if you can begin construction requirements, you have some time then to get your project done. Same thing true if you begin it in 2026 before July 4th, 2026, so before a year after the passage of the bill. Then you could have, up through 2020, up until 2030 to finish out the project. So those are important 4-year windows to finish the project. The issue there again is that there's this Trump executive order on the topic, which I'll talk about in a second. And then, if your project began after July 4th, 2026, then you have to be placed in service by the end of 2027. So a big issue is going to be, I think, on these projects, making sure you can begin construction if possible by, about 11 months from now, a little under 11 months, or a little over 11 months from now, and then you'll be in good shape. But we'll have to talk about the Trump executive order in a second. The good news is, though, that other technologies have generally not been affected by this big, beautiful bill. And the key one for microgrids is obviously energy storage. So energy storage, the phasing out starts in 2034, where you go down to, I think the next year is 75%, then 50%, then 25%. They did remove a section of the original IRA, which would have allowed for the tax credits to go beyond 2034 for these other technologies. In the past, include wind and solar, if we didn't meet certain criteria for bringing our carbon emissions down. But they took that out, so they made it kind of less dependent on carbon emissions and more just the timing of the phase out. One thing to note is that one technology they actually bolstered a little bit, and if it's helpful for perhaps as part in combination with a microgrid, might be good to think about now. Fuel cell properties that are put in place after where construction begins after 2025 get to qualify for the 30% ITC, regardless of whether they produce greenhouse gas emissions or whether they involve greenhouse gas emissions. Whereas in the past, under the 48E, which is the section that applies to this area for the tax credits, for the investment tax credits, they had to be shown to be basically GHG free. And you also don't have to meet the prevailing wage or apprenticeship requirements to get that 30%. But they did as a kind of on the flip side of it, they also though removed the ability for those projects to get the adders, the energy community and the domestic content adders for the extra 10% credits. So this is the executive order I mentioned before on July 7th. So basically right after the passage of the big beautiful bill, Trump directed the Department of Treasury to, within 45 days of July 4th, basically the enactment of the big beautiful bill, to take all necessary and appropriate action to strictly enforce the termination of the PTC, so the production tax credit, and the ITC, the investment tax credit for solar and wind. What this talks about, this is the exact language which is quoted obviously out of the executive order. It talks about this guidance, to create a new and revised guidance as the Secretary of Treasury deems appropriate and consistent with applicable law to ensure that policies concerning the beginning of construction are not circumvented, including by preventing the artificial acceleration and or manipulation of eligibility, and by restricting the use of broad safe harbors unless a substantial portion of the subject facility has been built. And I think what they're talking about here is, the existing guidance for begin construction is fairly user-friendly. You could argue how user-friendly it is, I guess, but it allows for folks to kind of lock in beginning of construction if they spend 5% of the project costs. By whatever date they spend that money, you qualify. Although in some ways you say it's more than just spending the money if you are an accrual-based tax credit or taxpayer, which for tribes there's been no designation of tribes as either being cash or accrual basis taxpayers, basically, so they don't pay taxes, so they're not really designated by the IRS either way. But if your tribe's considered an accrual-based one by the IRS, then you actually have to not only typically spend the money, but they have to, either have finished out the products that are being built, or they have to. It has to be reasonably expected that they finish them out within 3.5 months of the payment. So there has been a fair amount of things that folks have to think about already about meeting begin construction, especially for the 5% safe harbor. There's also one other way though too, which is by having any actual physical construction begin either on-site or off-site. If it's off-site, it has to be for stuff that's not, kind of an inventory normally, so not like solar panels, but for parts of the project that are not typically in inventory. So I think what they're saying here is they want to make it more difficult to meet that. There may be a higher safe harbor spend. There also could be requirements that you do more to begin either on-site or off-site construction. On the other hand, the phrase begin construction, is the idea of beginning construction, not having necessarily a substantial portion of your facility built. So there'll be, I think, a lot of thought that the Treasury has to put on this topic before they release the upcoming guidance or rules, which should be coming out before the end of August. So it'll be interesting. It's really going to be important to follow that and to think about that. How do we begin these projects in a way that meets whatever Treasury puts out, and we want to do so at the latest, if possible, on or before July 4th, because of the fact that then we can push out the time to complete the project being done. And the good news here is that, if you meet that, you get all the benefits of the IRA. You get they haven't taken away the bonus credits. They haven't taken away the direct pay. They haven't taken away even transferability, which typically tribes don't need because they can get the direct pay.
All right, thanks, John. Is that
Actually, there's one more thing maybe we get too late, but there's also, you have to watch out for basically Chinese components, that kind of stuff. The foreign entities concern. It's a very broad topic, but you need to think about both not having foreign entities involved in the ownership of the project, and you have to make sure you don't have too much of stuff from China and other areas, like mostly China, in your project too as you go forward.
and there's forthcoming IRS guidelines on rules on this too that will clarify the FEOC requirements. Thanks, John. That's helpful. Yeah, I want to allow for at least 5 minutes for questions. So yeah, any questions from those in attendance? I guess we were so thorough we anticipated and answered all questions. Quick question for the energy team. Who did you end up going for the flywheel?
It's a complex story, but who we ended up with was Amber Kinetics.
Okay.
We had a technology partner prior to that, and the technology didn't come to fruition, and so we moved to Amber Kinetics, who obviously everyone knows and has a long-standing tradition of providing flywheels.
Yeah, I guess one thing I'd like to mention too is like I've experienced multiple bankruptcies of developers and technology firms. So these things happen. So for both Paul and Rincon, there was a group called Swell, a developer that went out of business that had a number of kind of small, medium, commercial, industrial sized projects that took time to navigate. And then for Verona, originally we're looking to go with the long duration energy storage provider Redflow, and they went out of business. So ultimately it's you need to be flexible, I guess, is the main point of the story. And we've been able to navigate both successfully, but these challenges can and do happen.
For sure.
I see a question from Lucia. How easy or hard was it to obtain energy data for this project? Who's that? Is that which question, or who's that directed to?
So do you mean like your utility from the utility? Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the utility. I mean, ideally it's, you have a utility that has interval data that's available, like you have an account online and you can get easy access to it. In some cases, with some of the tribes we work with, they have what's known as conjunctive billing, where they have a number of meters that are kind of treated as one. And you're supposed to be able to still pull the individual interval data for each meter. But in some cases, I've been able to for some tribes, and for other tribes, they can't access it online at all. So you have to actually ask a utility representative for it. I'm helping somebody else in Southern California, in Anza Co-op, that supposedly they can get interval data online, but it just spits out all zeros, and then they're not as large as the IOU. So like getting a hold of somebody to get it takes longer. So it kind of depends. It should be easy, but it's not, unfortunately, always easy as it should be.
Another option to add to that, and that's certainly, Josh, what you're talking about is certainly the preferred and ideal way to get it. We have installed M&V on panels down to the sub circuits, and gone through the process of tracking interval data, when we haven't been able to access it through the utility or other means, but you know, that's another way of getting it.
Yeah, and this is maybe a little too far in the weeds, but that, interval data is just actual averages too. And so the devices you would put on to track the actual demand and usage would be more accurate, give you more accurate load profiles. And it's not, for the initial planning of the project, and if it's not a complex project, it's not really always necessary, but there's other ways to get it, but those, it's more expensive to go and install something, and then you need to have it on long enough to actually track the data for enough of a period of time to capture a full year profile. Any other questions? I guess from the Indian Energy team, like what one brief key lesson learned that you didn't cover?
Take control of the process. I mean, you touched on this, Josh, but take control of the process, because there are a lot of entities out there that are wanting to support and wanting to help, but they cost a lot of money and cause a lot of delays. And so control your own process to make sure that you're staying on track and on budget.
Yeah, but with a lot of our projects, we have our, on the owner side and the tribe side, we have project managers, construction managers, and others that are navigating all the challenges that developers sometimes haven't experienced. Like most developers who haven't worked in Indian country don't know things, haven't about secure BI rights of way and stuff like that.
Right.
So, awesome. Well, I really appreciate, Craig, Alan, John, you guys joining us today for this very informative webinar. We'll make this available online to you all. So thanks for attending, and be on the lookout for future webinars in this series. And hopefully we'll see many of you at Viejas in September.
Oh yeah. Yeah, come out and see us. That'll be exciting.
Awesome.
Thank you
Thanks a
all.
lot, Josh.
Thank you, Josh.
Have a great day.